Hi, welcome back. In the previous video, we looked at reviewing how to find a missing side using trig ratios and cross multiplying. And then we talked about using the inverse or the opposite of that function to find the angle measure if you know the two sides. We'd use the inverse of sine if we're using opposite with hypotenuse, the inverse of cosine with adjacent and hypotenuse, and the inverse of tangent if we know the opposite and the adjacent side. And then we did a couple of examples. So let's do a few more. Now, remember, if you're just opening your calculator, you definitely want to make sure that you are in degree format because we are trying to find our answers in degrees. So to do that on the online CMS calculator, you just click mode and you can see if degree is highlighted or not. If it's not highlighted, then you just arrow down to it and over, and then you hit enter to make sure that it is in degree mode. To get out of this menu, you just hit second and then mode, and you'll be back at your calculator screen. All right, so remember the very first thing we want to do is we want to identify the hypotenuse. So the right angle is going to move us towards the hypotenuse. And then we want to figure out what angle we're looking at. So since I'm trying to find angle N, that's where my smiley face is going to go. And straight next to that one is your adjacent side. So not the hypotenuse, because that's already the hypotenuse. We want the adjacent leg, so it's got to be one of the legs. The other piece that's coming out of that smiley face is my adjacent side. And then all the way across from that, on the opposite side of the triangle from the smiley face, is my opposite side. And then we're going to compare our labels to so, ka, toa, to see if we need to use sine, cosine, or tangent. Okay, all right, so then I'm going to circle the two sides I know. Before, remember, we circled a side that I was trying to find, and we circled a side that I already knew, but here we know two sides. So since we know two sides and we're trying to find this angle, I'm using these two sides to work backwards to find the angle. So I've got my hypotenuse, and I've got my adjacent. So the trig function that uses both of those is going to be cosine. And remember, we want to do the inverse cosine of the ratio. So remember, it's going to open up that fraction, and we're going to do adjacent, which is 27, over the hypotenuse, which is 45. Close that parentheses. Our seatbelt has to go on, and that's going to give us the measure of angle N. Okay, so I'm going to go grab my calculator so we can do that. The inverse cosine, so remember, if I want the little blue with the -1 cosine, I'm going to hit second cosine, and it opens the parentheses for me, 27 divided by 45. And you don't always have to close the parentheses, but remember, it's like seatbelt, just safe to put it on. When I hit enter, I get 53.130100325. And we want to the nearest degree, so we're looking for the whole number, which is going to give us 53 degrees. So the measure of angle N, I should say the measure of angle N, equals, I already forgot, 53 degrees. 53. And it's an angle, so I'm going to say degrees. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and minimize this so I can see my calculator and my screen at the same time. Okay. So now let's try that again with the next one. The very first thing I want to do is highlight notate, label where my hypotenuse is. Then figure out which angle I'm going to be finding, which is the measure of angle U. So that's where my smiley face is going to go. Which segment coming out of U, which side coming out of U is the adjacent leg? Well, it can't be this one because that's the hypotenuse. So it has to be this one. That is my adjacent leg. And then the side on the opposite side of the triangle from this angle all the way across, that is my opposite side. Okay, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to compare these sides to the ratios sine, cosine, SOHCAHTOA, and TOA, tangent. All right, the sides that I know are the hypotenuse is 45. And the adjacent side is 36. So just like the last time, I have my adjacent and my hypotenuse. So I know I'm going to be using the inverse cosine of the adjacent over the hypotenuse. My adjacent is 36. My hypotenuse is 45. And you could reduce that if you wanted to, but since it's not my final answer, I don't really need to. This is going to give me this angle, which we know is angle U. Okay, so then my answer, the measure of angle U, is what we're going to get when we type this in the calculator. Inverse cosine, so second cosine of 36 divided by 45, put my seatbelt on, close those parentheses, and I get 36.8698965, and I'm going to round that to the whole place because it wants me to the nearest degree. So that 8 is going to bump that to a 37 degrees. 37 degrees is the measure of angle U. Okay, let's look at the next two examples. Okay, all right, so when I look at this next example, I am going to first find my hypotenuse. My hypotenuse is going to be the 45. Then which angle am I trying to find? I'm trying to find the measure of angle R. So my smiley face is going to go here. Then I want my adjacent side. So starting from here, I'm not going to go along the hypotenuse because I want the adjacent leg. So that's going to be here. This is my adjacent leg. And then the side all the way on the opposite side of the triangle, we conveniently call the opposite leg, because it's all the way on the opposite side from the smiley face. Compare these sides to SO, CA, TOA, and that will tell me which trig function that I want to use. Okay, so my sides that I know my hypotenuse is 45. I know my opposite side is 36. So the trig function that has two check marks is going to be sine. I'm going to do the inverse sine to work backwards of the ratio opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is 36. The hypotenuse is 45. That is going to give me the measure of angle R. So when I put that in the calculator, I'm going to get the measure of angle R equals, and I'll have my answer. Inverse, oops, I forgot my one there. Inverse sine, so I hit second sine, and then 36 over 45. 36 divided by 45. I'm going to put that seatbelt on, and when I hit enter, I'm going to get 53.13010235. If I'm rounding to the nearest degree, after the decimal I see a 1, so I leave it as 53 degrees. Reset that, there we go. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and save the last two. Notice one doesn't have a picture, so you might want to come back to see how to do it if you don't have a picture. We'll save these last two for the third video. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.